You might know about the time in the Bible when Jesus was walking on top of the water towards his disciples. They didn't know it was Jesus at first, and so they were very scared. They thought it was a ghost or something else. But then Jesus said, "No, it's me. Don't be afraid." And Peter said, "Lord, if it's you, then invite me to come out onto the water towards you." He was asking Jesus for permission and power to walk on top of the water. And Jesus said to Peter, "Well, come on." And so Peter steps out onto the boat and he starts walking on top of the water toward Jesus. And it's going really, really well until he looks around and kind of realizes what it is that he's doing. And he begins to sink because he's afraid, but Jesus saves him. Why did Jesus save him? Because our God listens. As Peter was sinking, he cried out for help. He said, "Lord, save me." And the Son of God listened to him. He was listening and he took action. Our God listens. I bring that up because at the beginning of Psalm 28, that's what David is asking God to do. He's asking him to listen. He said, "Don't turn a deaf ear to me. If you just ignore me," he says, "it'll be like my whole life is completely dead and buried. There's no hope." And how did he know that? Maybe because of all the times in the Bible where it was clear that God listened to someone. Joshua, for example, who was leading the Israelites, he prayed that the sun would stand still so that his army would have a fighting chance against an army, an army that they were fighting, and the sun stood still. God listened. When Elisha was with his servant Gehazi and they were surrounded by an army, and Elisha was feeling confident, but Gehazi wasn't, Elisha prayed to God, "God, open his eyes so that he can see the army of angels that's surrounding the army that's surrounding us." And God listened. When Elijah was on Mount Carmel and it was him against 450 prophets of Baal, and they each took turns praying to their God, asking for fire to come down from heaven to prove which God was the real God. The prophets of Baal, they cried out, they cried out, they cried out, they cried out, but no one answered because there was no one listening. But when Elijah cried out just once, "Lord, send fire down from heaven so that everybody knows that you are the real God," then fire came down. Our God is a God who listens. He's real. You might have stretches during your life. You may even be going through a stretch in your life where you're wondering if God is listening. Or maybe wondering if you're someone that God would listen to if you were to ask him for something. And if you ever wonder about that, then just think about the prayer that Jesus offered when he was in the garden. There were actually two prayers, two different prayers. The first prayer was, "Father, I don't want to go through with this. Take this cup from me," he prayed. Those are the words he used. The cup of suffering that he knew was coming if he would go towards the cross. And he prayed that he not have to go through with it for the same reason you and I wouldn't want to go through with it. He knew how awful it would be. But then he offered another prayer in the same breath. "But not my will, your will be done," he said. And the Father wasn't going to be able to say yes to both of those prayers. He was going to have to choose one. And if he says yes to sparing Jesus from the pain that's coming, that would mean he says no to saving you and giving you a future with him. But if he says no to Jesus, saying yes to you, then of course he's saying yes to his own Son's incredible suffering. And we know what he did. As Jesus hung on the cross that next day and he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" But he knew the answer. And we do too. Because your God was keeping a promise to love and to forgive you. He was keeping a promise that he would always be there to listen to you. and that he would help. With everything that he has, he would help. And he will. So cry out to him. Ask him. Pray to him. Look for help. There's a title that David gives God at the beginning of Psalm 28. It's a title that shows up other places in the Bible too, but it's the title Rock. He says, I call to you, O Lord, my rock. Rocks, of course, are reliable. And that's what God will be for you. When you call out to him for help, he will be reliable in listening, reliable in answering, reliable in loving you, which is all he knows how to do. Rest well tonight, my friends.